Hello everyone, welcome to the Town Manager Download, a podcast about local government in the town of Shrewsbury. Today's podcast, we're going to cover a lot of the key aspects of the May 15th, 2023 annual town meeting. I'm Kevin Mizikar, the Town Manager of the town of Shrewsbury, and as always, I'm joined by Communications Coordinator Taylor Galusha. How's it going, Taylor?
It's going good. It's a big Monday.
It is a big Monday.
I don't know why, but it's a big Monday.
We're moving into our couple final big public-facing weeks of the year with town meeting and a lot of other things. Before we get into the boring work stuff, what happened over the weekend? Anything good?
It wasn't over the weekend, but I got a funny text from my dad, I think Wednesday or Thursday after the last TMDL episode came out, and he works from home, so he has his little desk in the living room. My dog hangs out by him because they're best friends. And every time he's on like a Zoom call or any sort of, if he's watching other videos or listening to other podcasts, she usually leaves the room and goes sits in the front. But he told me that whenever he's listening to the Town Manager Download, our biggest fan, Brady, is sitting right behind him.
That's
she
awesome.
does not leave the room. She's a dedicated listener. We won't say it's just because she can hear me talking, but so we have our official, I think, maybe biggest dog fan.
Nice.
And Howie is probably a close second. So.
That's awesome.
It
Always
warmed
happy
my
to
heart.
have every listener that we can get, including Brady.
Yep.
So we appreciate
She
that.
knows.
She knows the good podcasts. So yeah, we've been had a couple eventful weekends the last few weekends. So my oldest daughter Alexa is 16 and she's nearing getting her license and getting a job. So we've been doing some car shopping, which I don't know. It's expensive, and I mean, you know, everyone knows car prices have gone up a lot in the last few years, and I think we're dealing with that and just a number of factors. So, I mean, it's not my favorite thing to do in the world, buy a car. I don't know if there's anyone's, but, you know, adding another one to the car fleet isn't exciting. It's exciting to do it with Alexa and my wife, Erin, but, like, you know, I could do without another monthly bill.
I think my first car was a Hurricane Sandy Survivor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was flooded, but only up to a certain point, so we got a pretty good deal on it.
Yeah. We're trying to find those deals, and, you know, in some ways the internet's good because you can see a zillion different cars, and some ways that's not good, but...
Because you can see a zillion different cars.
Yeah, exactly. So you drive all over the place, and the best deal is always, 95 miles away.
Right.
And there's only one of them on the lot. So, but we'll get through that, which is good. But, hopefully she lands that first job for the summer and able to get around and enjoy all the freedoms of being 16. So good stuff. And then this past weekend, I had a house full of people. My wife's, all of her siblings were up. We were doing some trip planning that we have coming up this summer. And then her brother was in for California from a wedding, so that was kind of a surprise Saturday afternoon. I didn't even know they were in town. They were in Connecticut for a wedding in Middletown, so it was interesting. Full house this weekend of 4 extra people, so all good though. We had a lot of fun, so...
Good stuff.
Trip planning is well underway for a Disney adventure this summer, and we're going to do it with more people than we ever had, and as part of a big group, just beyond the family. So it'll be good.
We're going to do the Mimi Taylor Extravaganza 2.0
Again?
next year. Yeah, mother-daughter trip. It was that successful, so
Another winter trip.
probably.
Wow.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Good stuff for us in our Disney futures.
Yeah. Disney, speaking of getting a lot of money, Disney will be getting a lot of money.
Yes.
Along with the car dealer.
So what is up in the Shrew?
Yeah, we've got a ton going on in our, heavy town meeting busy cycle, but many other things too. Yep. We have competing surveys now.
We
right?
do.
So we made it to this over the edge of engaging with the community. What's going on with the surveys at this point?
So there's two, I guess, central projects that are floating around Town Hall within DPW and planning. So we have the town center area multimodal and transportation study. They have a survey out right now, kind of asking residents and those that travel through that area for feedback on different barriers that prevent them from using public transportation or other modes of transportation, how often they visit the area, and all that good stuff. And that one can be found at shrewsburyma.gov/multimodal study. And then the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan group kind of has been kicking off in the last month or so. They had their first internal staff stakeholder meeting. They have another group meeting coming up the last week of April. And then their survey is just kind of gathering feedback from the community on their knowledge of climate action measures, what the town can be doing, that type of stuff. And that one can be found at shrewsburyma.gov/allinshrewsbury.
Awesome.
Those are both the project pages. So if people just want to learn more about the projects, that's a great place to go.
The surveys are pretty brief.
Yes,
Yeah.
brief surveys. I added a little page off of the homepage under residents called ongoing projects, so people can go straight to it just to learn, see everything that's going on and learn more. I think it's super helpful just to be informed about them. So
It's great. Yeah. So, the town police station, the new police station, and that whole project, the evolution of that project continues. So I think that there's a really nice new perspective. We have the southern grounds kind of between the building and Maple Avenue are all hydro seeded now.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of all cleaned up. So if you're traveling eastbound on Maple Avenue, it's kind of a new profound perspective. I think it looks really nice, and there's a couple centering walls in place and benches, and we're kind of evolving down now, and the old police station will be coming down in the next few weeks.
saw landscaping going in too,
Yeah,
which is
trees are going
cool.
in and fences are being finalized, so we're kind of in the home stretch. The next 60 days or so on that project, it'll be wrapping up, and that'll lead us, hopefully not too much conflict with our first few food truck Thursdays that are starting May 18th
Yes.
at the town hall. So they start at 4 o'clock, run till 8 o'clock. So we're happy to bring food trucks back to the town hall for community gathering and residents and all that enjoyment. So that's
Saw
on
some
the
new
horizon.
new ones on the list.
Good.
So
Good.
looks like we've piqued the interest
Good.
of the food truck community.
Great. It's great. I'll have the pleasure, we're all over the place, but I'll have the pleasure a little bit later this week doing something that I really enjoy doing. I've gotten to do about twice a year since I've been here, minus COVID, is go to Mr. Aloisi's American Government class at the high school and talk to that group about local government and local government finance and revenues. So I'm excited to do that this Wednesday. It's always fun. I always make interesting connections with students and, get to talk about local government and share some interests and hopefully pique their interest a little bit more. So it's a good opportunity to do
awesome.
that. So I look forward to doing that this week. And we have one
State budget
Yeah.
stuff too. Like everything is happening all at
sec-
once.
yeah, second iteration of the state budget, which is House Ways and Means, which is now at the full House. So that was a positive for us. We were able to update some numbers in a good way, mainly associated with state aid for the schools, which is known as Chapter 78. So that the House was a little bit more giving than the governor was in that area, which is a tremendous help since it's based on a per pupil number, and we have over 6,000 students. So that's a good number for us, and that will all be helpful as we move into town meeting, which will be finalizing everything, really all the formal stuff short of pre-town meeting with the finance committee this Thursday. So
Wow.
that will be behind us. Hopefully we get through that. But the biggest meeting of the week is Mo DiPaolo's last select board meeting. that'll happen on Tuesday. So it'll be kind of late in the cycle for once this gets published, but yeah, it'll be Mo's last select board meeting, which, I'm sure there'll be many in attendance there to wish him well, former board members and staff and all that, which will be a huge change for the town.
Very
Something
crazy.
different. Yep. For the last 30 years since he's been.
We can plug our own episode. People can go
Yeah,
watch our
absolutely.
last episode,
Yep.
or I guess two before
Two
this
previous
one,
episodes, right?
to hear more about Mo's local gov story and how he got involved in everything.
Absolutely.
But I'm
was a
sure
fun
that'll
episode.
come up a lot at the April 25th select board meeting.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have him.
Yeah. So I guess we'll hit the main topic of conversation today, which is our annual town meeting, our big legislative event for the year,
Extravaganza.
the extravaganza that is town meeting. Who knows how many nights it'll go? I'm not going to make any predictions, except for more than one.
One.
I'll say that.
At least one.
One or greater. Of course, town meeting is our legislative body, and we've been on really this heavy cycle of preparing the town meeting warrant and the budget to get us to this May 15th meeting. And that started, 6 months ago at this point in time, really back in late October as we started looking at revenue projections for the upcoming fiscal year. Having a legislative body, unlike a city council or a town council that meets as many times as 2 times a month, we kind of have to have everything as close to perfect as it possibly can be by the time we get to May, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Makes us put a lot of time and effort into it, and hopefully that effort pays off when we communicate everything to town meeting members. We have representative town meeting here, of course, which we've talked about on many of our episodes, 240 members. And we're in that home stretch to get us there. And of course, interestingly, 1/3 of those members will all be up at the annual election, just like they are every year. They sit for 3-year terms. So we'll see how the election process plays out here on May 2nd. Several select board seats and school committee seats, and of course, 1/3 of all town meeting seats are up, some library trustees as well. So we've made it through one night of finance committee hearings on the warrant. We need to update them on our changes to the budget, and we'll wrap all that up on April, it'll work out to be the 27th with them. And then we'll be publishing all our materials come the following week after the election occurs, and we can mail everything out to all sitting elected town meeting members.
Yeah, I feel like mid-April till town meeting basically is just a whirlwind.
It is. It's a mad dash to town meeting itself, and then you always try to convince yourself that things won't be as busy afterwards, but that's never the
Never
truth.
true.
So we have a big warrant this year, 54 warrant articles. One big bucket of articles that I think really drives that number up about 10 over prior years is Community Preservation Act articles, which we can talk about. The warrant articles, it's kind of a foreign term outside of the Northeast that has town meeting, but really a town meeting warrant's essentially the agenda for the meeting. It lists everything that we're able to talk about, and if it's not within a warrant article, we're not allowed to talk about it. So 54 different areas of topic, conversation, actions that are under consideration for town meeting. Some are more routine and some are new and unique for this town meeting based upon the needs of the town or the specific projects that we're looking to fund. And town meeting, of course, has authority over all appropriation financial matters related to the town, local legislative authority for bylaws, and then so that's what will be in those various warrant articles, things that fall within those buckets, and we'll ask for town meeting's consideration and debate and hopefully approval of the majority of them, because it'll set the path forward for us next year and help us implement the strategic plan and fund operations and do day-to-day business and take on some new initiatives that we're excited about, and we'll talk about during this
Discussion.
podcast. Yeah. So that's where we're headed. So let's head into
We can kick it off, and
Yeah.
just because of how long it is, the warrant, we'll kind of keep it to the unique ones, and once we do our recordings of the full warrant with town staff,
Right.
there'll be an explanation for everything.
Right. So yeah, we'll touch on each and every warrant article like we have with the finance committee and the town staff overview. We'll film that later this week. So yeah, let's touch on some of the more unique and interesting aspects of the 54 articles.
So we'll kick it off with Article 4, which is the special legislation granting property tax exemptions for domicile of Ava Roy.
Right. So yeah, Ava Roy, this is a unique opportunity. So Ava Roy is the daughter of Christopher Roy, who was a Worcester firefighter who was killed in the line of duty several years ago. And Christopher and Ava were Shrewsbury residents, and Ava continues to be. She lives here in town with her guardians, her grandparents. So this would provide tax relief to them and abate their real estate tax payments in honor of Christopher's service, and to give them just a little bit of benefit, and relief, from that tax burden. It's the least that we can do in Shrewsbury. So this was an initiative that was identified by Principal Assessor Ruth Anderson, and she worked with Representative Kane to bring this warrant article forward to propose the special legislation, which will have to go get approved by the General Court in Boston, but it should sail right through.
So, and then we jump to Article 7, which is the Fund Override Stabilization Account.
Yeah, so this is kind of that centerpiece of the 2021 override that we've worked on with the community through the Select Board and School Committee's commitment that puts us on a path of at least 4 years without asking an override question. So we're going to deposit another $1 million, taking it up to about $7.1 million. This is the last year that I see any way that we can continue to deposit in, and we'll start drawing down over that over the course of the next 2 years, at least, maybe 3. Until we have to ask, another override question or assess where we are from the financial situation and see what we can and can't do, and have a conversation with the community about that at that time.
Article 8, FY24 operating budget, and just the general fund specifically.
Yeah, so this is, in total, we're probably spend about $180 million in directly funded initiatives through the town meeting, and the operating budget is the vast majority of that. It's $145,872,000. It's roughly a 5.25% increase over the prior year. And the operating budget, of course, funds our day-to-day operations for all aspects of the community outside of the utility funds. So it funds the schools, general municipal operations, our debt service, and then a category we call operating support, which provides benefits to Selco and the municipal operations and the school operations. So school is the vast majority of that, at a little over 83 million, and then municipal is about 32.4 million of that, and debt service is 12.5. So on the municipal side of things, really happy to move forward on some of the initiatives associated with the strategic plan. And from a personnel standpoint, we're able to fund 4 additional firefighters, at least partially, through this budget. So that will make sure that we have 3 firefighters on every truck at every station when we're responding to a call, which has a lot of safety implications if we only have 2, especially for a working structure fire when that engine's the only thing on scene. It's really difficult to manage only with 2 personnel. And then we also, which I'm really excited about, have funding for additional recreation coordinator position. So this should help drive more programs, more services, really a direct result of the strategic plan and the feedback that we heard from residents. So those are my key takeaways from exciting things associated with the budget. Of course, we're dealing with inflation, whether it comes to diesel, gasoline, fuel, utility costs, pens, paper, everything in between. So that has a big driver on the budget. We all know inflation has been greater than 5% So it's been a struggle to put together a budget that's in the confines of that commitment to the community that the select board has made. So yeah, it's been a somewhat of a more challenging budget process than we anticipated, but we can at least make some strategic investments and cover those increased costs. But it came with a lot of trade-offs. So there's I think more departments went down, year over year than maybe have in the past. So most departments in the past have been level or slightly up, and then a few higher increases. And this year there's like a mixed bag of some level funded, some decreases, and some more significant increases, of course, associated with staffing. So that's the big budget article.
Then we jump to the different, let's say, enterprise and special revenue accounts.
Right.
So Articles 12 through 16, which covers solid waste enterprise, sewer special revenue fund, water enterprise, stormwater enterprise, and PEG access.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one, so our enterprise operating budgets are pretty flat year over year. I think the one exception is we're adding a little bit of staffing in stormwater as part of our initial 5-year plan, since we have that enterprise and that revenue source. Yeah, but utility operations, I'll talk a little bit more when we get to the capital articles, because there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, so we have the three, or not three, but the three we'll talk about, the three capital improvement plan articles, 27, 28, and 29, which is related to the general fund, sewer, and stormwater.
Right, so the general fund capital improvement plan is pretty traditional. It's a little less than $2 million this year. We have a range of projects. Two of the bigger ones are $500,000 to replace the Floral Elementary School roof, the shingles on it. And then those are original to the building, so well over 20 years old. And then $325,000 for to replace one of the main dump trucks for highway, so it provides year-round service. A lot of service in the winter. Those vehicles are really expensive, so again, $325,000 for that. So that's about half of the entire capital improvement plan just in those two projects themselves. And then there's some software and IT initiatives that we have going on. So general capital improvement plan is rather similar to prior years. And then the sewer capital improvement plan has a traditional aspect to it and a unique aspect. So I think the traditional aspect is we're looking to fund about $2.7 million in what I'll call cash funded initiatives for this year. So where we're taking on projects and making investments in pump stations. We have a lot of pump stations given the topography of the community. And we need to constantly evaluate them and upgrade them and make sure that they're working as efficiently as possible and as safe as possible. So we have about $2 million into pump station evaluations, improvements, buying some vehicles to keep our fleet up to date. So that makes up the cash funded portion. And then we're also seeking a $9.8 million borrowing authorization for sewer to take on a significant project that includes upgrades and modernization of the Rolfe Avenue pump station, the Maple Avenue pump station, and a very large sewer force main that connects those two pump station and traverses Maple Avenue. So I think something like 80% of the town's sewer flows through these two pump stations and that force main on a daily basis, and it was installed in the late 1960s. So we need to make some significant investments there. The good news for this project is that we've been invited to receive funds, a loan from the state's Clean Water Trust. The benefit of the Clean Water Trust right now is it has a 2% interest rate. So it's at least half of the interest rate that we'd experience if we had to go out to the general market. So it's a good opportunity to be invited into that program. These are critical upgrades. Honestly, if we had a significant catastrophic failure at either of these pump stations or the main force main in Maple Avenue, most of the town would not have sewer service. So we don't want to see what that looks like.
No. It's important to take care of our
It
infrastructure.
is, very, yep.
That brings us to Article 30, which is another capital improvement plan item, the borrowing authorization for water.
Right. So
Water.
there's a little cash funded aspect. We're going to buy a truck and we have to make about $5,000 investment in the Poor Farm Brook basin,
Yep.
like we do every year. But we've reached this turning point with our investments in our water system, and I think it's driven by general cost and inflation, and then the age and complexity of our water system. So that tipping point is that, in my opinion, we can no longer fund our capital improvements sufficiently on a cash basis. So traditionally, we've gone in, raised the water rates enough money, sufficiently enough to make additional capital improvements, replace water mains, replace meters. Those things are so expensive, and we have, done our planning process for the next 5 years, and we don't think it's appropriate or that we can reasonably adjust the rate sufficient. We'd have to increase the rate by 40% over the next few years consecutively, and we don't think that's fair. So we're going to turn to or propose a bond or a borrowing model to take on these capital improvements. So over the next 2 to 3 years, we're requesting $12 million to spend on 2 to 3 years worth of improvements. So we take that debt service on. We'd be able to keep water rates adjustments between 3.5% and 5% annually if we do that versus 40%. And during that time, we'd replace about 6 miles of water main, do significant maintenance and upgrades to our water storage tanks, continue our ongoing water meter replacement program, and we'd also be taking on the design of a treatment plant to remove PFAS from the drinking water, which we can talk about in a little bit of detail. And we will spend some time in a future episode with Dan Riley really diving in on the water system and PFAS specifically. So it's just challenging. We have 200 miles of water main in town, and we have a 100-year replacement cycle. That means we need to do 2 miles every year to achieve that very long life cycle. And 1 mile of water main now costs us $1.5 million. So it's just really expensive. It doesn't seem feasible to do that by just increasing the water rate anymore. So we're switching to a model that many other like size and larger communities eventually have to get to and are using. So, you hear a lot from the federal government, the state government, big cities about their, capital improvement bond bills, and, so that's the model that we're moving to, like many of them already have. So
I try to put myself in a resident's shoe when I ask my questions on this podcast. What's the increase? Like you said it was between 3 and 5% on the borrowing plan.
Yep.
What is that compared to like previous years when the water rates have increased?
Yeah, so water rates have been increased every 5 to 8 years, and those increases have been in the realm of 25 to 40%. So we're trying to move away from that model. That's a big shock to anyone's quarterly, monthly, annual.
So this is almost keeping it more level. But,
yeah.
Or this method.
Yeah, we're trying to move to a system where everyone can plan, everyone understands what we're having, but we got to keep investing in the water system. We don't want to be, I don't want to name cities and towns on a shaming basis, but we've seen across this country what a lack of investment in our infrastructure and mainly water systems can mean for the health, safety, welfare for a community, and we don't want to go there. And this isn't anything extravagant. It's really maintaining the assets that we have. Kind of where we're headed to, though, the forward-looking thing is how we're going to treat PFAS, which, there's a lot of information about PFAS out there, and it's a forever chemical, and, it's from a variety of sources, whether it's firefighting foam to non-stick materials that go on goods and utensils and waterproofing materials. So we first let the community know in 2019 that we had elevated PFAS levels in our well, but our levels as they are right now are below the 20 parts per trillion. That's the state level.
Yep.
But the US EPA over the last 60 days have issued new guidance and told us they're heading in a completely new direction for the whole country, and their standard is going to be 4 parts per trillion. So
wow.
we're above the 4 parts per trillion, so we know we're going to have to treat for PFAS. So we want to move forward with designing a plant. We've already done a lot of piloting studies to understand what it is that we would need to do to remove PFAS from our drinking water. So we're way ahead of the curve in comparison to some communities. And we think that's a good thing because there's an unprecedented amount of interest in PFAS right now and an unprecedented amount of funding at the federal level. So we want to be first in line for those funds and mitigate costs, even if it's a low interest or a no interest loan for our water customers and our ratepayers. So if we can put ourselves in that position by doing some design work over the next 18 months, we would be coming back to the community to request funding to put a treatment plant.
Yeah, I remember Dan and his team coming to the board this time last year to talk about the piloting program, and I thought David Snowden and Dan did a good job discussing the borrowing and kind of their plans for PFAS at the April 11th select board meeting. If people are interested at home to watch them talk about it, I think they do a good job explaining it, making it.
Right.
I could understand it, so I think everyone could understand it.
Yeah, no, that is good.
So Article 31 is to appropriate for the Oak Middle School windows, and that's kind of a transfer, correct, from a different.
Right. So yeah, two things really. So we were at town meeting last spring, and we did request some funds. We were originally looking at we thought we had about $1 million project ahead of us, but as we went through the full design and put it out through estimators and worked with the contracting community, that number's really about 4 times that. I hate to say it, it's about $4 million. So we're looking to transfer some money that we had left over that wasn't used but borrowed from the Beale Elementary School construction project, so about $1.5 million. Then we put $455,000 in free cash in place last spring. We are seeking a borrowing authorization here of almost just shy of $2 million. We don't ever intend to borrow.
Right, this is part of that MSBA accelerated repair program, right?
Right. So MSBA is committed to funding 52% of the project cost, which is that $1.9 million number. But we have to prove to the state
that we could pay that 52%.
Yeah. So we need to take care of all that in this single article. Eventually, we'll come back to town meeting and rescind the borrowing authorization and move on without ever having to borrow for the project. But we have to put it all in place now.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's more. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a formality, right? MSBA requires us to do it this way. So if we want 52% of the funds, we got to do what they ask us to.
Article 32 is to fund the expansion of the cemetery at 65 Prospect Street.
Yeah, I feel like this is a well-known project, something we've been talking a lot about over the years. There's been some public information sessions on it really recently. We've been doing design work for 18 to 20 months on it. So the total project cost here is $4,370,000. Again, we're going to transfer some funds in for some prior projects to keep the impact as low as possible. Another $1.99 million from the Beale Elementary School project. So this will take care of all the money that we've borrowed but didn't need for that project. So that's a good story,
right?
Right? Like we came in well under budget. We actually borrowed more money than we needed, and we can use those funds for this project. We have $650,000 that was originally dedicated to the Toblin Hill Bridge reconstruction. That's not needed because we have the bids in and the work's underway for that. So we can dedicate that to this project. And then that leaves about $1.7 million that we are seeking a borrowing authorization.
Okay.
So that's a really small number given the grand scheme of the budget and the general finances of the town. So hopefully over the next 2 or 3 years through some short-term borrowings, we can buy that down and not have to pay a lot of interest, and we will work, and as we always do, to find the most cost-effective route forward for this project. But it's really good. We have a $4.4 million investment, and the maximum total borrowing would be about less than half of that, 1.7. So I'm happy that we can get to this point and move forward with this project.
Yeah. And there's information on that project as well on that ongoing projects page that's
For
off
the
of the homepage.
yep.
Yeah, for residents just to read more, get the recording of the public meeting that they held and everything. And this article kind of pairs with Article 33, which is designating the balance of Prospect Park for park purposes.
Right. So the cemetery itself is the property's like 75 acres. The cemetery expansion's roughly 20 acres. And there's been a lot of conversations and comments to the select board and the community that said, well, people have enjoyed the use of this property, even though it may not have been designated as such. They've created walking trails and things like that in there, and they'd like to see that to continue. So that's what we're going to do with this article. We're going to say, well, those areas that have been used for playground-like purposes, park-ish purposes, will continue that way in perpetuity. We'll set those aside. We know the 20-acre development of a cemetery is at least a 50-year window.
Right.
So I'm not a fan of kicking it down the road for someone else to decide, but 50 years is a long horizon, and the trend is that we would need less land than more as more people
choose
in the
different
country.
methods.
Right. Yep. So I think it puts us in a good spot. We have a 50-year horizon, which is a very long horizon in the grand scheme of things, and we're setting some land aside for open space. So
good balance of the needs and the wants of the community. So Article 34 is a citizen's petition.
Right. So we'll provide a letter out to all town meeting members, but so this citizen's petition had a legal implication. It was associated with a prior vote of town meeting with regards to 1 through 7 Maple Avenue and the select board's authority to dispose of that property. Based on case law and prior rulings that have been affirmed the same way by the court system really over the last over 100 years, the moderator has ruled this out of order. That's what will happen at town meeting. We'll just move beyond this article.
Okay.
So.
And then kind of what we touched on at the beginning of this, we have a lot of CPC projects.
Right.
I'm not gonna count them, but Articles 36 through 44 are nine projects.
Yep.
Label. So 9 CPC projects to talk about at town meeting.
Yeah. So, so there's about a little over $1.2 million in total CPA funds that are being dedicated and recommended by the Community Preservation Commission for funding. It breaks out that there's about $160,000 in historic preservation type projects and a little over $1 million in parks and open space initiatives. Some of those highlights include, some park master planning to really put us on a good track to develop all the park space that we have. We'll be replacing and refurbishing the basketball courts at Dean Park. And then a request to set aside or purchase some additional land at 443, 457 Lake Street and 104 Grove Street for open space purposes, and that's a $435,000 request. So a good initial offering from the CPC of project funding, again setting aside $1.2 million. It's available to them to take some action and do some things in the community that we haven't had the opportunity to fund in the past. I'm excited about these articles, so it's
like their first complete cycle of the committee, so it's super cool for them too.
And it's interesting because they raise about $1 million from the Community Preservation Act tax every year, so this is a good balance of keeping some funds in the bank.
What they raised and what they're spending. Article 48 is to fund the emergency medical services study.
Yeah, so EMS in this community, we've long benefited from a partnership with UMass and Worcester EMS, where UMass has provided free ambulance service to the community. They put an ambulance at the Harrington Avenue fire station, and they were dispatched from there, and they provided that at no cost to the town. Given a number of complexities, both on the paramedic staffing side and just cost of running a service like this, they've indicated that moving forward, and as soon as our next contract cycle, which will start next January, that they're no longer going to be able to offer that service to us on a no-cost basis. So we think this is an opportune time to do a comprehensive study and understand what it is, what our cost options are. Should we start our own ambulance service? Does it make the most sense to continue to partner with UMass and pay them? What would that cost be? And then, or is there a hybrid model that we could consider? So we have seen the communities like Northborough and Westborough and Auburn, who have their own EMS services within their fire departments, have not really seen the implications that the private nonprofit ambulance services have from staffing issues. They're a little more secure in their staffing and a little bit more attractive. We always want to provide the best service, prompt ambulance response. We've seen that service decline recently. We've had to rely upon those other neighboring towns for more mutual aid, which has led to longer response times. So now's the time to look at it, get the most information that we can possibly have, and then make an informed decision during that next contract cycle.
The consistency is important to the town for both service providing, but also like budgeting purposes too. So.
And I guess the other option that I didn't mention is, do we contract with some other private ambulance service? So we'll explore all those things through this study. $65,000, some budget numbers. We've talked to some consultants in the industry, and this is what they've centered in on. I think this is really important for us to do to control our own destiny in the future.
Right. And the last group of articles, which is also the last 4 articles, articles 51 through 54 are the 4 zoning bylaw adjustments.
Yeah, so we often at annual town meeting, we make some changes to the zoning bylaw for a number of reasons, and there's 3 things that kind of stand out for me this year. Is we're providing a clear path forward for energy storage in some of our commercial districts. So we know battery storage is a critical component to green energy in the future and storing energy, especially when it's generated through things like solar. So we want to provide that opportunity and continue to be a leader in electricity and supply and climate action here in Shrewsbury through Selco and in partnership with Selco. And then there's some adjustments to some of our zoning districts along Route 20 for a commercial equipment rental to make that process a little bit more straightforward. A lot of businesses are already providing that service, and it's a confounded way to get there. So we wanted to kind of clean that up. And then interesting new use that we're seeing in a number of communities is adult day health. So it's not necessarily medical, but it's a unique type of use that some property owners are interested in exploring. So the planning board and planning staff have worked to develop some zoning districts for that type of use. So yeah, I mean, it's a big warrant, 54 articles. We're looking at, 180 million or so in total spending and another $25 million in borrowing authorizations. It's, it's the state of business that we're in and what we need to do to continue to invest and operate the town. So looking forward to having those conversations with town meeting members on May 15th and getting their feedback and seeing how they vote.
Yeah, and people can find the warrant online under the town meeting webpage from the Shrewsbury website. And all the hearings have been recorded thus far and will continue to be leading up to the meeting if people are interested in participating or just staying up to date on everything. So shout out Shrewsbury Media Connection.
Yeah, and as we noted before, there will be a full town staff conversation with some departmental leadership and technical experts on all the warrant articles. It's available for folks in advance of town meeting. This will be published in advance of town meeting, so encourage new town meeting members to review that video and the prior hearings that Taylor has mentioned as well. So I guess without anything else, we'll see everyone at town meeting, and I wanted to thank Taylor for the conversation today and leading us through the 54 warrant articles that we have before us. It's been another episode of the Town Manager Download. Of course, if you ever have any questions or comments, you can reach us at tmdownload@shrewsburyma.gov. So on behalf of Taylor Galusha, I'm Kevin Mizikar. Thank you for listening.